Okay, well, friends, my name is Shebu. I have the great privilege to be one of the pastors at Canterbury Gardens Community Church, and this is part of our CDCC discussion series where we are taking some time to talk on certain topics. But today we are going to spend some time talking about the book of Lamentations. Now, we as a church started the series on Sunday morning where we spoke through Lamentations 1 and 2, and then we're going to go through the next few chapters. And I reached out to Jill. Now, this is Jill here. I have the great privilege, or have had the great privilege to be in one of her classes at Ridley College here in Melbourne, where she is on faculty there. And I was looking up her bio, and then she's the lecturer in Hebrew and Old Testament. And so, Jill, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Shebu. It's really good to be with you personally. Enjoyed having you in class and hearing what's happened in your church, and also to talk about the Old Testament, which is A1.
Yeah, well, just to kind of give us a feel of background, tell us a bit about yourself. You're obviously lecturing, but that's probably not your whole thing that you do, right?
Yeah, so in my past life, I've had a few past lives. I married a guy who was being ordained, so I've been a minister's wife.
Yep.
I've been a missionary in a couple of different places. I've been I'm ordained myself. I'm an Anglican priest myself.
Yep.
More recently, I've done a PhD in Psalms. Yep. and lecturing at Ridley, and I've also worked in some parishes, including the cathedral, the St Paul's Cathedral.
Yeah, beautiful. And when did you get a heart for the Old Testament and becoming now an Old Testament lecturer? Was it a journey? Was it a moment?
Yeah, it was a journey and a moment.
Yeah.
I went to Ridley when I was 18, when I was finished, before I'd finished school, to say, can I come and study theology? And they said, oh, you're a bit young, because they had a cut-off. Go away and do something for a year and come back, when you get older. So the guy that I married was from Western Australia, so we went away from Ridley, and we went to Western Australia, and we went to Brood Island, Hong Kong. And then 25 years later, we came back to Melbourne. So I went back and I said, I'm a little bit older. Can I come in here? And at that time, my idea was Greek and Hebrew, to read John's Gospel in Greek and the Psalms or Isaiah. I can't remember if it was Isaiah or something. Maybe it was Isaiah in Hebrew. That was kind of like the point. I loved Greek. I did Greek first. I thought I'd love to teach Greek, but nobody ever asked me. But then I did Hebrew. I thought, this is it. This is, so I threw Greek not completely to one side, but I sidelined it. And I just went for Hebrew and did all the Old Testament subjects in Hebrew at Ridley. And then I was asked to tutor and then lecture and blah, blah, blah. So it just, but it was a moment.
Yeah, right. And you've been to Israel, or when you've been able to go to Israel when we were to?
Israel. Yeah, I went once on a kind of a pilgrimage tour in 2007, and then I went back with my husband. We went to work on our Hebrew in a full-time kind of setting. That's where we learned to play with the toys.
Yes, I remember the toys.
Come to Ridley and learn Hebrew with the
toys.
That's
right.
So learned to do that, and then I went back a couple of years ago helping to lead a tour, which was partly Sudanese students from Ridley and partly just anyone else from Ridley. And I stayed and did another course at the Hebrew University. So, I've been a few times and done different things each time. Yeah. Great.
Well, as we kind of jump into Lamentations, I guess the question firstly I have is, do you have a favorite Old Testament book that you love? I mean, you've written a few books yourself, and you've also made commentary on certain books, like particular Psalms and others. Is there something that really resonates with you that you keep coming back to yourself?
Yeah, I'm working on Jeremiah mostly at the moment, so that's a good pair for Lamentations. Yeah. And the reason I love it, the reason I started on it, I was actually tutoring for someone else, for Andy Abernethy, who was another lecturer some years ago, and I did a seminar where we did the part about God's tears in Jeremiah. He cries quite a few times, and the students were crying. And I thought, this is a book that makes Ridley students cry. I need to, I'd never studied it in any depth, but I thought this is a book that changes people's lives. So when they asked me what would I like to teach at Ridley, of course I had to do Psalms, because that's my subject. But I said, and can I do Jeremiah? Because it's a book that is seeing the heart of God is
Yeah.
just fantastic. And Lamentations,
Yeah.
that really well. Yeah.
And well, that's a great segue. I mean, I guess to kind of get agreed, we've just started Lamentations on Sunday as a church. We've done sort of mini snippet on the Sunday service, obviously, and then some of our small group leaders had a mini seminar that I ran, which I think was very average. But I guess in my mind, as we think about the history of Lamentations, the language, the poetry, what comes to mind? Where would you start to kind of describe Lamentations for us, to give us a sense of the book?
Yeah, so the historical background is really important. It's written either like eyewitness account or soon after, or listening to eyewitnesses, who knows, based on the fall of Jerusalem in 587 BC. So that's to the Babylonians. That's when they went on exile to Babylon. And it was just a horrific time. They didn't expect, they thought that God would, protect Zion. There's all these psalms about, God is her strength. But they didn't read the part 2 of each line, which was, if you follow my laws and if you listen to me, so they thought God will look after us regardless. And so apart from being horrified because of the fall of Jerusalem, they were shocked because they thought, what's happened to our God? Why isn't he looking after us? So this soul searching, anger, tears, horrible devastation. And
that comes out in the first few chapters, this sense of just, and that, like, in relation to that, like you said, they didn't read the second sort of line of being obedient to God's law and commands, and the warnings that he's gave. I guess that brings out the theme of judgment for us, and particularly if we live, in a sense, as Christians on this side of the cross and the empty tomb, there's this constant language of God's love, and we know there's God's wrath on Jesus, but I guess God allowing and causing this, but it feels very uncomfortable.
It's huge, isn't it? His own people, what was happening there. I think the book of Jeremiah actually helps us a lot.
Good one, nice.
Because, it gives us the historical background, right? It's actually the most detailed account, even though lots of the historical books have all this blah, blah, blah that we don't get in any other book, like, say, Samuel. You get all the David stuff in Samuel, so that's like a background to Psalms. But Jeremiah is the place where we find out all the details, and we find out that Jeremiah preached for 23 years. God sent direct messages. If you don't do something about this, this is like, for 400 years I've kind of put up with you being naughty, but now I really need to do something about it. And for 23 years, every day he went out and said, look, friends, this is really serious. And they said, oh, Jeremiah, you've been telling us this for 23 years. Never going to happen, mate. Just, go. Or, oh, no, we're fine. Or another thing they said was, oh, well, we're praying to the Queen of Heaven and she'll look after us. So, stupid, Yahweh, your God, our so-called God isn't doing anything for us, so we'll check in with the Queen of Heaven. So, that helps us. Like, we don't have to think, Lamentations, God might one day come and smite us. Canterbury Gardens might be swept off into the earth because God secretly got angry with us and smashed us. And then we're like, look what Lamentations happened to me. But it's not like that. This is God's people, the historical story, 400 years of monarchy where they went bad, 23 years of careful, direct warnings from an approved, like the pipeline of God figure. So we have to have that in our mind. And then the second thing is that God told them if they didn't repent, he would bring the Babylonians. But he didn't say, and I'm organising them to rape and murder you, and you have to go to exile. He does warn them that exile will happen if they keep rebelling, but it wasn't just that they were naughty, they were also in political rebellion against their superiors, who were the Babylonians, who were like their overlords. So it's a bit like Victoria telling, it's not like, because the feds haven't got any powers, but the feds had guns and powers. Perhaps a bit more like Hong Kong and China, though I don't want to go there. But, you tell the feds, we're not doing what you want, and they say, we'll come in with the guns. That's the Babylonian Israel situation. So God said, look, just surrender all through the book of Jeremiah. Surrender, surrender, surrender. Nothing bad. They'll come, but then you'll just have like an overlord for 70 years and then I'll set you free. but they said, no, we're going to rebel. So it's much more complex than
okay.
and God smashed them. God said, I've got this kind of, arrangement that I'm going to put into place, which I don't want to do.
Yeah. And
everything went haywire because they kept rebelling politically, which brought down the smash politically. That God was in ultimate control, but he didn't say, now I want the Babylonians to go in and rape all the women.
Rape and kill, yeah.
Wasn't the plan. Yeah. And God's tears are all over this whole thing. Yeah.
And do you want to unpack that a little bit more? I guess is that tears language there. That I'm just wondering about that as you talk about it. It's prompted me. What does that actually mean? And being a poetic book, and then there's the acrostic language that most of the commentators talk about. What does that have to like? Why does it matter? Does it matter, or is it just a cool little trendy thing like us preachers say, just to show that we know what we're talking about?
Yeah. All right, so I'll go to the acrostic thing first, and then I'll go back to the tears because that's actually Jeremiah with the tears. So that's
okay, sure, got it.
All right, so the acrostic thing, it's so cool. I think you can't see it in English, but each of the first 4 books, there are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, as you should know, and each of the first 4 books use like A, B, C, D, E, all the way to Z, Aleph to Tav, and so each verse, or sometimes all the lines in the verse, begin with that. So people have different, it's just poetic, like a sonnet or a rap song has certain conventions, but it does have some effects. Like if you say, look, I'll give you the A to Z of suffering, you sort of feel by the time you get to Z, oh, we've covered 22 awful things in that, like, don't tell me anymore. Or here are 22 things you can do. You get like a list of 10 things to make your marriage better, or fix your car, or get a better garden. So there's a kind of a sense, not that you've fixed the problem because it's unfixable, but that you've kind of got a bit of a grasp. So having 4 alphabetical acrostics kind of gives you that sense of, well, we've been through it, and in the book you get, first time you go through, you're with Lady Zion, and looking at Lady Zion, and then she speaks in her own voice. So you've got like, oh, that was so bad for the inhabitants. And then you go through it again, and then you have a man's voice, I am the man. And then you have another voice that just describes all the pain of what happened. And then the last one is a prayer. And even though it's not an acrostic, it has 22 verses. So again, people who can count in the Hebrews are all into this 22 business. But, again, it's very neat. I haven't really thought why isn't an acrostic, it just isn't. But there's some poetic effect. Maybe it leaves it just a little bit more open. Close, 22, 22, 22, 22. And then the last one, it's the most sustained press. They were like, oh, this is so bad for us. And it's like, well, over to you. And I'll throw this in case I forget later. God doesn't speak in Lamentations, which is not surprising, but he does actually get a few lines in the Psalter, like Psalm 50 is all God speaking. And there are other bits where it says, and God says. So you do get a few lines from God in the Psalms. It's not only our words to God, but this is completely human said prayer and reflection.
That's really helpful. And so I guess at any point you can jump in, Jill, is that that language of then disciplining then, what does that actually mean? You've touched on it a little bit. What does that actually mean today, do you think? Like you talked about Canterbury getting smited because we haven't listened.
I didn't say that, right? I said it's not like. It will. If something horrible happens in Canterbury, I'm not saying.
You're not being.
I'm just making sure in case people weren't listening.
Sure.
Okay. I don't want to become one of those people who's famous for saying Canterbury.
Right.
Yeah. So discipline. I guess in a big sense, when we think about discipline, like there are bad people who just like going around hurting people and telling people what to do. And we have that where, that's in the forefront at the moment with some things like, people who are controlling of other people. That's, being a concern. And we're thinking about like Aboriginal people being locked up, which is again a discipline thing, which is not necessarily motivated well. I mean, I was thinking historically, but of course I've got to go now to death in custody as well. So there is discipline which is either a bit stupid, like I had a teacher who used to hit us. We were in like sixth form. You don't need to hit sixth formers, not girls anyway. I think it was even illegal to hit girls. But you know, whatever. That was an out of control freak type guy. But in a relationship where you are in some way responsible, like a parent and a child or a boss and, you know, whatever, you need some discipline, don't you? Otherwise, things until people are capable of doing their own thing, or if they have to work in concert, you know, like cooperating, even free, capable individuals need some discipline. So you say, well, we agree we won't talk about this outside the group, or we'll agree that, you know, we'll all come on time or something. It's discipline. It's just part of being alive, really. So in the specific, you know, lamentation situation, you've got a omniscient, omnipotent God. So he's pretty good, really, like capable. He knows what he's doing. And you've got people who he's saying, look, I'll help you with your lives. And they're saying, oh, no, thanks, you know, we're good. So it's not like one person, a normal person, controlling another person. And he's giving them a choice. He says, look, I'll give you 23 years of leeway here. So I think all those factors, it's quite complicated, really. It's not just like simple. If you don't do something bad, God will smite you. You know, he's merciful. He gives lots of specific warnings at the end of the day. And there's a way out. There was a way out. They just had to surrender. Like the first they should have done is stop doing the bad things. The Babylonians wouldn't have even come. And then once they mucked it up so the Babylonians were on their way, it's like, we'll just surrender to them and you'll be fine. You know, like the policeman knocks on the door. Hopefully they're not armed and, you know, drunk or something. But if it's the same policeman, you know, it could be safe. It could be, you know, safe to go with him. So I've probably lost the thread of what you're asking me.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, is it more specific?
Yeah.
I feel I didn't get where you wanted to go.
And maybe this relates to that question about how can we read it in light of Christ, you know? Because for those of us who've grown up very heavy New Testament sort of perspective of life and scripture and you know, we come across Lamentations, it feels almost something doesn't compute here. Like, and I guess maybe from your experience as you look as an Old Testament scholar and someone who loves the Old Testament, sees it as one big story, not sort of, how can you help? What would you recommend or consider, and how to connect the dots in light of maybe that'll help us consider discipline. Yeah.
All right. So I'll probably try and do 2 or 3 things, and I might forget where I'm going. So just
sure, go. I'll interrupt. It's okay.
Yeah. So I think the first thing is that sometimes people get black and white or green and purple or something about the Old Testament and the New Testament. Jesus is quite mean to the Pharisees. You know, you hypocrites, woe to you. Like, woe to you, woe to the people of Jeremiah and Lamentations time. You know, Paul says horrid things about his enemies. You know, some of them aren't, you know, what we want to do on public TV. You know, so, you know, and Jesus does say, Father, forgive them, you know, on the cross. But he does also say in some of the parables, there'll be wailing and gnashing of teeth. So I think he's very concerned on the cross that some people don't know what they're doing. And he doesn't want any judgment to come to them, which is, you know, amen, hallelujah.
Yeah.
But I don't think he ever thought that those words would be used to stop people confronting evil or separating abusers from victims or stopping war criminals. You know, Father, forgive them. Let Hitler roll. You know, ready to forgive. Of course, he would be ready to forgive if Hitler repented. The whole story that would be very complex. But I think, you know, the first thing I want to say is sometimes we think, oh, the Old Testament God punishes, but the New Testament God forgives. And we have to see that judgment and mercy are together.
That's good.
It calls us all to do the right thing. And if we don't, there'll be consequences, but there'll also particularly be eternal mercy. you might spend the rest of your life in jail because you did, seriously bad things, but that won't cut you off from going to heaven or being a Christian. In some cases, that might mean that we forgive people who, I think we would generally want to forgive people, but we wouldn't be letting them off the hook.
Yep.
Not hurting others as they may have hurt us or people we know, or paying, restitution, paying actual money or community service, people who've done a lot of terrible crimes, like against children or whatever. Perhaps jail service isn't enough, maybe you need to pay the money back for, what.
Yeah. So, and with that, that's really helpful, kind of connecting the dots there. And with that, can we then read Lamentations in light of the gospel and Christ? What does that actually mean? Because, like you said, Lamentations finishes with this sense of questions. It's not a neat little tie or bow, like with Job, things were like restored and everything was fine.
Yeah, things are good. Like Job, people love Job, and I love Job.
Yeah.
Jeremiah as well is a really bad news story. Job starts off rich, has some period, it doesn't say how long, and then he gets his children back and his cows and twice as many chickens and whatever. But Jeremiah is called, never allowed to get married, his family hate him, everybody tries to kill him his whole life, and then he gets carried off, kidnapped. Like people trafficked sort of, except that I don't think he became a slave, but he was like kidnapped by guerrilla soldiers and taken off to a country that God said don't go there. And then he lived among people who hated him. So his whole life, no wife, no children, no friends, family hated him. It's a horrible, horrible story. So getting back to Lamentations, one of the ways of reading it, or there's a lot of ways of reading it for us, I think, with those who are grieving. I said I lived in Hong Kong. These city laments have become very alive to me. Seeing what's happened. I know in Hong Kong, and congregation members or others who are watching, might be thinking about a city where they have relatives or where they live themselves, which has been many deaths or the tsunami, those kinds of things. It gives us an opportunity, even as Christians, to lament. Some people read every book of the Bible as if Jesus was the speaker. It's a good way because Jesus did inspire. It says the word was God and the word was God, and this is His word. Glory to Him. But they do it more directly, thinking of Jesus as the one lamenting.
Right.
That can be great. Here's a chance to say that to God, right? That God does weep in Jeremiah, and we know that Jesus wept. We've got a few, at the tomb of Lazarus when he's looking over Jerusalem, and I think another time, which has gone out of my mind. So we know that Jesus.
So he weeps over the city, for example.
Yeah, that's right. He weeps over the city, and then when the women weep, he says, "Don't weep for me," But his heart is with them. He's like, "Don't weep for me. I'm weeping." I don't think he actually cries that time, but he's like, "You guys you're the ones who need the weeping." And so, our heart can be with the heart of God, not just thinking, "Oh, I'm sad and I'm, poor me," but God is weeping with me. That I find that a very fruitful way to read these painful books.
That's helpful.
Yeah, not say, "Oh, we've got to be joyful because Jesus rose," but Jesus says, and God cried, and the martyrs in Revelation are still crying out. They're not saying, "Oh, thank you, Jesus, this is so nice." They're like saying, "How long?" And so some people are like, "Oh, the cross is after Jeremiah, but Book of Revelation is the last one," and that tells us that the martyrs are still crying out, and so we're allowed as Christians to cry out.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I guess another thing I would say is that the Old Testament gives us the clearest look into Jesus' mind. We get a few little red letter things in the New Testament. I don't want to be mean about the New Testament.
No, I know. Yeah.
But we get these little red lines, right? Whereas, of course, the whole New Testament was authored by him, I guess, in the same way as the Old Testament, in that he inspired it. But it's 25%. We've got this 75%. which Jesus had memorized. He was living out of it. He's always doing an Elijah or a David or a Jeremiah. He does a lot of being Jeremiah. A lot of things he enacts, like the Den of Thieves thing. He got that out of Jeremiah. So he's embodied all this stuff.
Yeah.
Just like, living it out. But we're thinking, why did he do that? We think, let's what was he reading? What was he thinking about? And here we have, like thousands and thousands of things that we know were in his mind. We don't know whether he liked chicken for breakfast, but we do know that he knew these books frontwards and backwards.
Yeah, it was really soaked into his life and everything that he said and did. Yeah.
So we love Jesus. We love, his words and his mind. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess in light of that, as we kind of sort of think through concluding, is that any application that you would suggest that we should consider or any last bits that you like? This is one thing I want to make sure I tell you this, Shebu. Do you think?
Yeah, so I've got 3 books I want to show you, and I'll say why, like, these are my applications. All right, so this one is Christopher Wright, and it's just his little BST commentary on Lamentations. He says, I didn't really think about Lamentations much, but when they asked me to write it, I wrote this commentary. So it's kind of like a fresh look. It's really good. This one is by Rico Villanueva, who's a Philippine scholar, Old Testament scholar with PhD. And he, like, you can think about the Philippines, the natural disasters, the political disasters, the things about poverty.
Yep.
I think it's just fabulous applications in it. My God, why have you forsaken us? When you think about terrible things, he says, restore us to yourself. And Jesus, please enough, when things are really, really terrible. And why do you forsake us for so long? So these are kind of laments that we can, you don't need the book to get them from.
Sure.
I found it helpful to have a look at that book, to read through the eyes of someone who is like in the thick of the sort of things where you lament. This last one is Soong Chung Ra, who is in America, and it says it's called Prophetic Lament. It's actually a book about lamentations. And its subtitle is The Call for Justice in Troubled Times. And I guess, like, the reason that Jerusalem fell was they were grinding the faces of the poor, they were cruel to widows and orphans. Ezekiel, we know that Zedekiah didn't honour the political promise he made to the Babylonian overlords. Like, you'd think God wouldn't care, right? Like, I'm God, don't worry about them. But he's like, the reason you're going down is because you didn't keep your political promises. Like, that is not how we think, is it? We're like, no. I prayed, and I love Jesus, and like, well, what about your promises to your boss? So I guess there are a few different things, caring about injustice in the Book of Lamentations. Seeing, like, in chapter 1, she says, I did do wrong. And in chapter 3, he says, I didn't do wrong. So there's room for the innocent and the non-innocent in suffering. And some people are too tight. What did you do wrong? God is punishing you. Like, no. Jesus said, let's don't go there. And even the Book of Lamentations says, let's not go there. The innocent can suffer. And then what we've been talking about, lament. It's a great book for lament. I'll just say this last thing that I thought was good that I got out of it right. He says, the meter, I'll try and do it. Tell me if you can hear it.
Yes.
I can do it on the microphone, but it might be too loud. So it's got like 3 beats, and then the second line is only 2 beats, which is kind of blah, 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 blah. So it's kind of like a limping meter is what some people call it. At Kino, it's the lament, like the tune you use when you lament. And the whole book is a bit like that. 3 bigger books, 3 bigger chapters, and then the last 2 are a bit smaller. Like we kind of limp a bit to a conclusion. So I think you said before it's left a bit open. We don't get like Job, and we've got our copies back. Goodbye. We get, oh Lord, how long? And that's all right. It's not nice. We hate being there.
Yeah, totally.
The Bible doesn't tell you there's something wrong with your prayer life because you still are saying so. what now? That's an all right place to be.
Yeah.
And he's weeping, you know, with you.
Yeah.
And with the others that perhaps you're concerned for.
Yeah, that's a great reminder. I think sometimes, particularly in our Western context, we tend to want to rush through and fix things. Yeah, that's right. Where Lamentations are a wonderful reminder. It's okay to sit there, and God invites us to do that.
Yeah, and together. You know, the last one is the beginning one is Lady Zion by herself, and the man is speaking on behalf of people. But the last chapter is we. So at some point, you know, to pray as we can be first or last, but not to leave it out.
Yeah, that's great. But Jill, that
not just we, our congregation, but we with our, you know, people we're concerned for in other countries or in the flats or wherever they are.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it puts us makes us to push outward still in our lament, rather than staying inwardly focused, which is a helpful reminder.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing about lament, which you've probably taught elsewhere, is lament isn't whinging to your friend, God is horrible. Lament is saying to God, you are not doing well, and I'm not pleased. So it's a dialogue. It's like I say to you, look, Shebu, you didn't behave that well in my class. Not true. Rather than saying to the principal, oh, Shebu, he's a naughty boy. This is a direct conversation to God. I'm not pleased with what's happening, and I'm in pain. And you know, what are you going to do?
Yeah, that's
not talking behind his back.
And that's beautiful, isn't it? That's the God that we worship and serve invites us into that kind of conversation. He doesn't need to.
What kind of God is that? He cries. He wants you to shout at him. Yeah, it's not the fluffy pink God who doesn't feel pain.
Yeah, great. Well, Jill, we really appreciate your time. And I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to share before we wrap up.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess you obviously work for Ridley. Tell us a little bit about Ridley. If people are thinking of studying, where to start? Obviously, Old Testament. Is that what you would say?
Yeah. So I think you should start where you feel the most comfortable. So I started with church history because that was my, what I knew more about. I don't recommend that to other people, but I was pretty at home there. Of course, I want everybody to start with Hebrew, and you would have the best time. But most people would start with the New Testament, probably. Lots of people start online, but we do have evening classes. But at the moment, we're all Zooming because of the lockdown.
Yes.
But in real life, like say next year, you could come, or even later this year, I'm not sure. There'll be evening classes every semester, including introductory ones, and there's online, and then during the day, which is the, lots of chance to get together.
Yeah. You can
connect, use the library. So that's great. So this semester I'll be teaching Old Testament introduction in the evenings, and Jeremiah for an advanced course with Hebrew. And next year I'll be back on Hebrew and advanced course on Psalms.
Okay, great.
Lots of other good lectures, lots of
sure.
Have a look, check it out. Ask Shebu, get a testimonial. Have you got a little testimonial yourself, Shebu?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, the Hebrew class, to this day, I still have things that come back to my brain because of the way that you taught, which was not just rote learning of information, but actually engaging us in a language, and it made it come alive, which, it just was beautiful. So I would highly recommend it. Now, Jill, are you working on any book at the moment or something that's already come out? I know in Aussies, we don't like promoting ourselves, but here in our church, we try to create a culture of encouraging and honouring people. So, is there something that you've written or coming out at the moment that we can keep an eye out for?
Yeah, thank you. So I've written a couple of academic chapters, one for a British book, one for an American book that'll be out eventually. I've just finished editing. It hasn't gone to the printer yet, but it's nearly there. A book by Australian evangelical women writing about all kinds of topics, biblical topics, like mine's about weaponized rape in Jeremiah. And lovely ones on, like, that's a bit brutal, but you might like one on, like sensory readings of the Psalms or discipleship reading of Mary and Martha, and there's things on work and stuff like that. That'll be coming out either end of the year or early next year. It's called Grounded. that'd be a great book that people could enjoy. And then I've got some other academic writing that I'm doing on Psalms and Jeremiah.
Okay, great. Well, we really appreciate your time, Jill, coming today. I don't know if you're, this is not on the questions I sent you, but I don't know if you would be up for reading something from Lamentations in Hebrew, something that you'd like reading and that for us to meditate on as we finish up.
I'll just read the verse here. Echa, that's a last. Yashavu badad ha'ir, rabati hayata ka'almana, rabati pagoyim, sharati b'medinot hayata lamas. So that was the last. Lonely sits the city, once great with people. She was great among the nations, but she's become like a widow. The princess among states has become a servant.
Well, friends, thanks for joining us. I hope you were encouraged by it. I know I was. And Jill, thank you again for your time in spending with us today.
Thanks, and all the best with the coming semester for you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.